Welcome to the Writer's Journey podcast. I'm Michael Laran, a science fiction and fantasy author on a journey to go from nobody to bestseller, and I'm documenting every step of the way. Tune in every week as I pull back the curtain on my writing life and how I'm building a writing career while working a full-time job, raising a family, and attending law school classes in the evenings. You can find show notes for this week's episode, a free starter library of my fiction, and much more at michaellaran.com.
Hello and welcome to episode 149. 149 is a good number, and I titled the name of this episode, What Happens When You're Unproductive? Because I had probably what was the worst week in the past year in terms of my productivity. Even I fall down and can't write anything. And so what I want to talk about is how I weathered through that and what are some strategies that I used to come out of an unproductive week, because I think it happens to all of us. You sit down at the beginning of the week and you have the best of intentions, and then life happens, and then 7 days pass, and all of a sudden you have nothing to show for what just happened. And we're only human. So real quick, announcements. I have a lot of announcements this week. It kind of makes up for not having any last week. First things first is that my next Writing Power Hour is going to be Saturday, January 23rd at 10 a.m. Central Time. That is 11 a.m. Eastern Time and 8 a.m. Pacific Time. And I believe that would be 4 o'clock in the UK. Don't quote me on that. But if you're interested, stay tuned. I will be sure to share that link here on my social media channels. In fact, actually, I'll share it in the show notes. I'll create a streaming link for those of you who are interested in it. So we're going to start this back up. For January, I am going to do it on the 16th, but moving forward, I think it's going to make a lot more sense to do it the first weekend of the month. I just didn't want to do it in January because of the New Year holiday. So we'll be moving forward the first weekend of every month. Writing Power Hour, be about an hour and a half. Your opportunity to sit down with me, get some words in. We'll have some fun. We'll take breaks every 20-25 minutes. It'll be a grand old time. All right. Now, second thing is that I'm actually appearing at 2 festivals this month. And when I say festival, I'm talking about free festivals for writers. There's no strings attached. You just give your email address and you get lots of great information. And the first festival I'm appearing at is the Indie Author Prosperity Conference, which is completely free, and it will help you build your author brand. That is taking place later this month. I have a link in the show notes. That is hosted by Rahel Wallace, and she is a fellow author who is trying to give back and on her own personal journey to figure out how to become a successful writer. And so she's curated a lot of interviews with myself, my good friend Dale Roberts, and a lot of really other great self-publishing experts to give their advice on how do you become successful as an indie author. So check out that. The link is in the show notes. And then I'm also appearing at the Creative Prosperity Festival. And this is a festival geared toward beginning writers, particularly toward young writers. And this is hosted by Noelia Velasco. And I like this conference because, like I said, it's geared toward the young folks who are just coming into this, because Noelia herself is a young creative, and so she is on a journey to figure out, how can I become a successful writer? How can I go full time with my work? How can writing become a viable strategy for someone who is maybe getting out of college or wanting to look into writing as a viable career? And I just think that's great. That's what this is all about. And so that's amazing. So I did an interview with Noelia as well, and I'm appearing at that festival, and you can sign up in the show notes. It's ironic, I guess, that prosperity is in both of the festival titles. I don't think they're related, but definitely check them out. I would recommend check them both out, but if they're, take your pick of which one you like. Now, wins for the week. I reorganized my studio. So, this has been this week, or no, it's next week or 2 weeks. This month, I should say, is the 1 year anniversary of my basement flooding. I woke up one morning last January, came downstairs, heard a I heard a weird noise, woke up, went downstairs, and there was like 2 or 3 inches of water in my basement. It wasn't a lot of water, but it was enough to completely destroy the floor and the carpet. Everything had to be ripped up. Had to call the water mitigation people. They had these giant fans down here, and my utility bill was nuts because I had to run the fans for like 2 or 3 days straight. They had to come in and cut out all the drywall, replace it. Then I had to come in and paint everything, repaint everything, and it was just a major pain. And after that, I made some changes to the studio as a result. One of those changes is I don't have anything on the floor. There's only 1 or 2 things on the floor, so that if this ever happens again, I don't lose very much, because I lost a lot of stuff. I lost books, I lost wires and some electronics. It was a terrible thing. And so I've kind of taken that to heart, and I reorganized my studio, and I actually bought some new stuff. So this is really not that related to the flood, but I bought a standing desk, and the desk is great. I got an uplift desk. I think I might have talked about this last week. So I got the standing desk. I got a lot of accessories with it. I'm all set up, but I had to rearrange everything to make room for the desk. And so I'm really happy with it. I kind of reorganized the energy in the studio, and I feel like it's making me more productive. And one of those reasons it's making me more productive is that this desk I have is completely flat. The last desk I had, and there's a story behind it. There's something here. Just trust me. The last desk I had, it was like this Amish, like it wasn't an Amish desk, but it was like one of those desks that tried to look like an Amish desk. Like it was very ornate, and it was a great desk. I had no problems with it. But the problem with it was that the sides were beveled. All right. And when they were beveled, that means I couldn't get anything attached to the desk. So like a microphone boom arm, I couldn't attach anything to that. And so there were a lot of things I couldn't do with that desk. Plus, it was just a little short for my height. And so it was contributing to a lot of back and neck problems. And so I've been saving for the last few years. This is not something I just bought on a whim. Been saving for the last few years to get a standing desk. And it's here now, and one of the cool things about it is that it's completely flat, so I can attach a microphone arm to it. So when I'm ready to record the show, I just pull the microphone over and hit record. And another great thing about it is that I can use that microphone now to dictate. So I can dictate on my bike, but I also have another microphone on my desk where I can just dictate standing up. I can dictate sitting down. Yesterday, I dictated walking around the room, so I don't have to be tied to my desk, and that makes me more productive. So that's the big win for the week. I finally got everything where I want it. All right, now lesson learned this week. I got to share some news with everybody. So a few weeks ago, this was maybe a month ago, or maybe longer than that, I had an episode titled Michael Meet Ted. And I talked about my process for applying for a TED Talk. And you guys know TED Talks is something I enjoy a lot. I watch a lot of them, and it's been one of my dreams to be up on the TED stage, standing in that red dot, sharing an idea, hoping that it will spread and inspire people. And so I applied because TED is coming to Des Moines, and I had the opportunity to apply. It's a very rare opportunity to be able to apply for a TED Talk, and it's even rarer to be selected for a TED Talk. They're very selective, very difficult to get in. I unfortunately did not get in. So I'm not sure if it was the strength of my pitch, or I'm not sure if it just had nothing to do with it. It was just that it wasn't what they were looking for at the time. Whatever it is, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm not going to lie that I was a little crushed last week. I think I got the news on Monday, which was just perfect news to get on a Monday morning, right? So I admit I was a little down. I was a little crushed on Monday, but as I started thinking about it, it was I'm really happy for the speakers who were selected. I'm really looking forward to what they're going to share. And when you're rejected for something, you almost have to be grateful, even though it sucks. And let me tell you a story. So I know I'm getting long here. I applied for this job years ago. This was, I don't know, it was like back in 2011, maybe 2012. And it was this job in insurance. And I thought it was the perfect job for me. I really, really wanted this job. It was to the point where I could see myself in the job. Like I could see myself in the chair. I could see myself with the title, and it was just cool. And, and I just thought that job, I thought I was going to get it. And turns out I didn't get the job, and I was just devastated, and I just kept thinking, why didn't I get this? I trained all my career for this job, which I didn't have much of a career for then, but I was like, I had the perfect personality for this job. Like everybody in this new department would have known me. It would have been a perfect fit. I had it in my head. I got, maybe big ego. I don't know what it was, but I didn't get the job. And, it wasn't for anything that I did. It's just that I wasn't a fit for what the hiring manager was looking for. Well, it turns out that hiring manager seemed like a really nice person, but turns out they were a jerk. And the person that got the job ended up hating their life and ended up leaving the company in disgrace, and that put that person's career back several years and completely changed the trajectory of what they were wanting to do. And I think about that, and it's like, damn, I avoided a bullet, And so ever since then, I've always told myself, be grateful for the jobs you get, but be especially grateful for the jobs you don't get. And I think the same is true with rejection, Be grateful when you get accepted into something. It's awesome. But also be grateful that you don't get picked for certain things because maybe it's just not a good fit. And so that's how I had to kind of reframe this TED Talk rejection. I'll have an opportunity, it sounds like, next year to apply, and, we'll see at that time if it's a good fit for me, and, we'll just keep charging on. The good thing is that right around that same time, another opportunity came that was like amazing. So I can't share what it is yet, but I might be able to share as early as next week about an opportunity that I got that is a really big deal. So, one door closes, another opens. And so the writing life is full of rejections. And I guess that's my message. Maybe I'm telling this more to myself than I'm telling it to you. But, don't worry so much about getting rejected. Just focus on the next opportunity, So anyway, that was a long lesson learned this week. But I promised that I would update you on that. And yes, unfortunately, my strategy with the pitch did not work out. So it means I'm not going to share what that was because it may not have any value. I'm going to have to do things a little bit differently next time. But again, I don't know why the rejection happened. It just did. So idea of the week. So this is an idea that I had because I'm in the process of working on this new novel, and I've had to really rethink my productivity method. So I'm in the process of writing this novel. I'm almost at 40,000 words, if I'm not there already by the time that this goes live. So 40,000 words out of what I think will be a 45,000 to 50,000 word novel. So I'm pretty much there, And I've been thinking about what it is what's the order that I'm going to get this done. So normally, I don't use beta readers. For my last novel, I used what I call alpha readers. I had some people read the first couple chapters. These were dedicated urban fantasy readers, and I just wanted their feedback. Hey, does this feel like urban fantasy? Yay or nay? Would you continue reading just based on what you read? Yay or nay? And they gave me some really candid feedback and some things that helped me understand where the book might fit in the market. So I'm actually not going to do that this time around. The main reason being I believe in this story enough that I don't really care whether it succeeds or fails. So I'm not doing the alpha reader route this time, but I am doing something a little bit different. Something I have not done previously is I've done a lot of research, but okay. So I watched this movie last week, Pixar Soul. And in that movie, there's a lot of jazz, and there have been a lot of concerns in the movie industry, particularly in animation, on how African Americans are portrayed in films. Not so much their personalities, because that's always a thing, right? Are you using a stereotypical character I'm actually not talking about that. I'm actually talking more about how they actually appear. So how does the lighting look on their skin? And so Pixar, to their credit, actually hired consultants to help them with that. They hired consultants to help them with the portrayal of African Americans. They also hired consultants to help them with the portrayal of jazz in the story, because jazz is a big it's almost like a character in and of itself. The music is great, and so they hired consultants for that. And so I was like, okay, that's a great idea. This story I'm writing takes place in a city that I've never put a story in before. I'll just throw it out. It's the city of Chicago. So what I've decided to do, I've been to Chicago many times, but I've never lived there. And so what I want to do is make sure that the city is represented properly, that the story does the city proud, and that the things that take place in the story aren't going to be jarring to people who are from there. And so what I've done is I've actually got a few people who live in the city of Chicago, and I've hired them to read snippets from the book and give me advice on, okay, is this right? Is it wrong? Is it accurate? And I'm doing that this time around to see if I can get that right. So anyway, I know that's a long, I'm going long here. But then what I plan on doing is probably getting some beta readers. So if you happen to be an urban fantasy reader, you're interested in this, I'll drop a link to a form. You can fill it out. I'm really only looking for urban fantasy readers on this, though. So if you're an urban fantasy reader and you're interested in beta reading, I will have probably a pretty quick turnaround. So just fair warning on that. I may only give like 2 weeks, maybe 3 on it. But if you're interested, check out the show notes. So beta readers is the next element, and then copy editing, and then proofreading, and then, the final line of defense. So as I think about what I like to call the royal order of editing, just as an idea, the first order would be the alpha reader. This is someone who reads the story in its purest and most unadulterated form to let you know does this work or does it not work. Then the next order is what I would call subject matter consultants. So these are people who have expertise in a certain subject matter area that you do not, who give you advice on whether it works or not and help you get that portrayal right. It could be a science thing. It could be a religion thing. It could be, in my case, a city thing. Every book has at least 2 or 3 subject matter areas that you probably need this help in. And then beta readers, and then copy editing, and then proofreading, and then, the final line of defense. I don't include developmental editing in my royal order of editing, but you guys know how I feel about that. So just an idea to think about. I'm really interested in how this subject matter thing is going to work. I've never done it before, and so I'm just looking forward to seeing what I learn from it. Now, anyway, topic of the week. So I wanted to talk about unproductivity. So this past week, it was just a rough week. There was just some things going on, personal circumstances that happened that I needed to deal with. Nothing crazy, but just things that come up every once in a while that you got to deal with. And so I had the goal of finishing this novel last week. I thought, Sunday night that, I'd be done with it by Thursday, and Monday came and everything kind of spiraled out of control. It wasn't really the TED Talk, but there were some other things that happened on Monday that I had to deal with. And so that's okay. It happens. And so I just I woke up Monday, things happened, and then Saturday, I think it was, I woke up and it's like, okay, now I think I'm in a better position to write. So how do I do that? And I just like to tell people, the reason I was doing this episode is because somebody on one of my blog posts, they posted, and they're like, wow, I'm really... Because every day, even though I didn't have any productivity, I still posted on my blog. And I said, hey, I got 0 words. I got no excuses. Have a good night. And one person posted, and they're like, it's really, really refreshing and cool to see you post this. I didn't think people would care, but it was kind of cool to see that people liked seeing that. Because, I'm not, even though I wrote a book called Be a Writing Machine, And even though I've written over 50 books, I don't write every day always. I mean, I try, but I just don't do it. And so I don't know. It just shows you can still be productive and you can still be prolific even if you don't write every day. And it's not worth beating yourself up for having a bad day or a bad week or even a bad month. Just think about the law of averages. If you tried to sit down every week and write, or sit down every day and try to write, and you failed 40% of the time, well, that's okay, because the other 60% you succeeded, and probably you had days in that 60% where you knocked your word counts out of the park. And if you probably added up all those days where you wrote above your average, it probably helps to offset that 40%. So at the end of it, let's say, I'm just going to do some terrible math here. Let's say, you write 100 words, or let's say you write 100,000 words in a year, right? Well, you do the math on that, and it actually doesn't look as bad as what you thought. I'm actually not going to do math because I'm just going to embarrass myself. I can do it if I sit down and think about it, but I hope you understand what I'm saying here is that the law of averages, even if you have days where you miss, the days where you write, the variance in those days should be enough to where it's really not that big of a deal if you miss some days. I mean, I had some days, during my beast mode where I was just knocking out of I was literally in beast mode, I would write like 5, 6, 7,000 words a day, and then I got this week where I write nothing. So those days during the beast mode, that makes up for it, So last week was probably one of my worst productivity weeks in a long time. And that's okay, like I said. And what I wanted to talk about was the process of getting back on the horse and picking up the pieces so that I could continue being productive. So let me talk about how this happened, how this was kind of like a huge problem. So I was already at a rough spot in the novel. I was right around, I think, somewhere between 60 and 70%. And that's usually where I start to hit a rough spot. It's usually the last rough spot before I hit clear skies until the end. It feels like every novel has it. Every novel I've written always has a couple of predictable spots where things just go off the rails. Usually it's around the 20% mark, almost without question, somewhere between 20 and 30,000. I like to call this it's when the honeymoon phase ends. Because when you start the book, it's you have all this energy, you're enamored with the story, you're enamored with the character, everything feels good, and then you get to a point where the story starts to evolve in ways that you didn't think, and then you start to doubt it. All right, that's without question somewhere between the 20 and 30% mark. That's usually the hardest one. If you can get past that one, you're usually going to be okay. But then somewhere around the 50% mark is when you hit the next one. This one's usually not as bad. It's just there's some confidence issues with the story. Maybe there's some things that you have to go back and fix earlier in the story so that you can plow forward, because maybe there was something with the plot that there's a plot hole that you encountered. And the 50% mark is usually not that bad. And then the last rough spot is usually around like I said, between the 60 and 75% mark, usually closer to 75%. And that one's usually not as bad either, but it's just like you're kind of running out of gas and you just need to get over that final hump. And then once you figure out what the end is, it's like a mad dash to the end, and you get all this adrenaline again, kind of like you had in the beginning, and it's not a big deal. So I was at the third rough point. Well, what I didn't realize was that I didn't realize I was at the third rough point. I thought things were good. And so I was just starting to get to the point where I was running out of gas. And then Monday happened, and I had this like I said, this opportunity that came up where I had to meet a deadline. Like I was under a contract to meet a deadline, and I didn't have a choice but to put the novel down. So, I'm not going to break a contract. You've been to law school. I know enough about that to know that that's not a good idea. So I had to do that. And then, naturally, I'm not going to get into politics, but the political events of last week here in the United States were certainly had me glued to the television. Let's put it that way. And so that didn't help my productivity either. And then also got some bad news at work. I'm fortunate enough to have a job, but my boss resigned and that kind of sucks, so there's that, and there's some of the uncertainty around that. And then I had some other things going on with family. And so last week was just kind of a tough week. And so I got to Saturday. I was at a point where I got the project taken care of. I had to turn off all the news networks. Things were a little bit clearer at work. Family issues were resolved. And I got to about Saturday night, and I'm like, okay, I think I'm at a point where I can continue writing now and not have any baggage, right? So I did. I sat down on Sunday, I think it was. I said I was going to write. I wrote. I didn't get very much written. I think it was like 500 words, but I eased myself back into it. And I think that's the thing. Like, it's when you go through these seasons where things happen, and fortunately for me, this was just a week. Sometimes it's longer than that. Sometimes it's significantly longer than that, And I just let things go. I said, you know what? I had a goal. I wasn't able to hit it, so I just put it aside. And, you set a date if you can. Dean Wesley Smith talks about this. You fall down, you don't write, take care of what you need to take care of, set a date, and when that date comes, if you can do it safely, sit down and write again. And what I found is that things just kind of fall into place after that. Like the first day I wrote like 400 words or something like that. And then the second day I wrote 3,000. And then I was off to the races again. And the reason I was able to pick up and kind of ramp up my productivity is because, I took care of those problems. If I had continued to try to write during all the things that were going on, my productivity would have been junk because my creative voice just wouldn't have allowed me to write. So that's why I always tell people there's 3 causes of writer's block. The first cause is lack of inspiration, meaning you just need to read more, or you need to go watch some movies or do something to fill your creative well. Second cause of writer's block is fear, because you think you can't do it and you get stuck in the theater of your own mind. And that is really just learning how to fight your fears. The third cause is personal circumstances. And you find that when you take care of those personal circumstances, or take care of them to the best of your ability, then you'll find that the writer's block goes away and you can continue to write, right? So, that kind of is what it is, and I just want people to know, like, just to not beat yourself up because you can't write. Like, I talk to a lot of part-time writers, and time is of the essence. They don't have a whole lot of time. And it sometimes can be a bit defeating when you have a day where you intended to write and things go off the rails, or maybe you're just staring at a blinking cursor, and the words just aren't coming, and that's okay. Slowdowns. I like to think of slowdowns as part of the writing process. Like, I've only had a few novels. Actually, I can only think of 2 out of the 29. I think I've written 29 novels at this point. There's only been 2 novels that I've ever written where I wrote them straight through in like a frenzy. Like, every day was on fire, and I wrote the novels in like a week. There's only 2. That's only happened twice. And those were just special novels. I don't know what it was about those novels that made that happen. Usually it's peaks and valleys, and it's sitting down day in and day out. But you're gonna have some days where you're productive, some days where you're not. You're gonna have some days where you miss, and that's just part of the process. At the end of the day, it all evens out. Like, even though I missed a week of writing, I'm still probably on track to publish a record amount of books this year. Knock on wood, assuming nothing happens. So a week in the grand scheme of things, not really that big of a deal. especially as you're starting the year. We've got a whole year to look forward to, and hopefully this year will be better than the dumpster fire that was last year. And so I just encourage everybody to think about what your goals are, figure out what your strategy is if slowdowns do happen, because it's not really a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and always figure out what the plan is. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond. And how I responded was to do nothing for 6 days. And at the end of that 6 days, I was ready to rumble. So that's all I had for you this week. I hope that you have an amazing weekend, and I will plan on talking to you next week. Peace.
Thanks for joining me this week. If you enjoyed this episode, you'll enjoy my backlist episodes at michaelaran.com/podcast. For your free starter library of my favorite novels, join my fan club by visiting michaelaran.com/fanclub. If you're a writer and want to connect with me further, check out my YouTube channel, Author Level Up, for helpful writing advice at authorlevelup.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week.